Welcome to the EvokeCast. I'm Coach Leif Whittaker, and today we're embarking on a step-by-step climb of Mount Everest and Lhotse from the south side in Nepal. For this journey to the top of the world, we're lucky to be guided by Garrett Madison, the founder of Madison Mountaineering and one of the most experienced high-altitude guides on the planet. Garrett has guided hundreds of clients on the world's biggest peaks. He's led the Everest Lhotse combo, as well as the Nuptse Everest Lhotse triple, and he's spent more time above 8,000 meters than most of us spend in the gym, which is saying a lot because we spend a lot of time in the gym, but he has been at high altitude a whole lot. He's also one of the rare people who can talk about Everest with both the big picture and the practical details in mind. What works, what doesn't, what actually matters when you're up on the big mountain. The plan today is simple. We're going to walk through a typical Southside expedition from start to finish. We'll talk about choosing a guide, training and preparation, travel to Katmandu and the trek to Basecamp. We'll talk about the rotations through the Khumbu icefall and up onto the higher parts of the mountain, and then the summit window for Everest and Lhotse. And of course, don't forget the descent, the way down. The summit's only halfway. You got to get back down. We'll also take a few tangents along the way to talk about gear and oxygen, uh, helicopters, decision making, whatever else comes to mind for us along the way. So, Garrett, thank you for joining me. I imagine you're getting things together to head to Nepal pretty soon. I understand you're shooting for your 16th summit of Everest this year. That is incredible. And, I've climbed Everest twice. When I tell people I've climbed Everest twice, their first question they ask is, why the hell would you do it twice? So let me flip that question back to you. Why the hell would you climb it 16 times?
Well, thank you, Leif. It's great to be here with you on the Evoke cast today. And that's awesome that you're remembering your two Everest expeditions. I think we were on the same flight out of Seattle to Tokyo in 2009 for your first trip to Everest. It was my second. And boy, what a start to a journey. Everyone's journey is part of their story. Going to Everest, hopefully summiting the highest peak in the world and returning home safely to regale others with tales of triumph or tribulations. But why would I do it 16 times? Fingers crossed. Hopefully, we'll get up there for number 16 this May. I love going to Everest. For me, Everest has become such a integral part of my life, my year. This will be my 19th Everest expedition, hopefully 16th summit. But the first time versus subsequent times going up the mountain have been very different. The first time was very special for me personally because I hadn't been there before, and getting to the top of the world and experiencing the magic at the summit and the feelings of exhilaration and accomplishment and joy and also gratitude to those that helped make my journey possible and supported me along the way. Um, that was very interesting first time, but going back subsequent times, it's been as a guide helping others achieve their goal and dream. And if I feel like I'm contributing in some positive way to their achievement, their success, and I can share in their experience, their enthusiasm, their joy and accomplishment, then that makes me feel really good, like I contributed to their experience in a positive way. So if I can add a little bit of value into my climbers' journey to the top of the world and get to share in their experience a little bit, that's a lot of fun for me, and it makes it worthwhile.
I feel the same thing with coaching. I get that same, um, joy and excitement when the people that I've worked with head off to Everest every season and get to test the fitness that they've built up for months and years. And, uh, I'm lucky because I don't have to go up there myself. I get to live vicariously a little bit, I'll admit, through my athletes, which is an amazing thing. But I love what you said about just being a part of someone's experience like that. And I think that's so valuable and so important. I remember, you know, you're trying to, I believe you're looking to surpass Dave Hahn with he has 15 summits, if I'm not mistaken. So you're looking to become the highest number of summits for any non-Sherpa climber. Is that right, Garrett?
No, it'd be for an American-born climber because Kenton
Okay.
Cool from the UK has 19 Everest summits.
Oh, Kenton.
So
Okay,
he's a
man.
ways out there, but right, Dave Hahn and Dave's a great friend, mentor, and colleague of mine since 1999 when I first started as an apprentice guide on Mount Rainier. I was working under Dave Hahn, and he's just been an incredible influence on my life in the mountains. Taught me so much. But we're tied for 15 summits of Everest now, so the most for an American-born climber. If I can get one more here this spring, number 16. But it's just a number, and who's counting?
Yeah,
But just going to Everest and being there, it's such a spiritual place for me as well. And I've made so many good friends over the years there, Nepalis, Sherpas that I climb with, and that own the tea houses we stay in during our trek up to base camp in the Khumbu Valley. Other international guides I work with on other peaks, and the climbers on my team that I've climbed other mountains with, and now I'm there and getting to be part of their Everest journey, Everest experience. It's just an incredibly special time for me, and I think you'd agree and feel the same way that going to Mount Everest, whether it's a trek to base camp or a climb up the mountain, hopefully to the summit, is just such an incredible journey and moment in one's life. To get to be part of that and share in that is pretty special.
it is. And I remember when I asked that question to Dave, how do you keep coming back here year after year? He said the mountain always taught him something new, and he always learned something, and it still was hard. It wasn't like every trip to the summit was easy. There was always a lesson from the mountain, even after that many trips. And I think of, my years rangering on Mount Baker, and I think the same thing. I've been up that mountain so many times, but there was always something a little different about it, a lesson to take away from it. For us mere mortals, one trip up Everest is a heck of a lot. It's a hell of a challenge, and I think this mountain will really show you what you're made of. It'll find your weaknesses. It'll find your mental and physical weaknesses and bring those to light. So you better be prepared for it. And as we jump off on our journey up Mount Everest here, I think one of the first things we should discuss is selecting a guide service. And we could look at this both ways. I imagine there's also a sort of guide services looking for good clients as well. So what are some questions that climbers should ask or things they should think about when they're thinking about a guide service? And, the reverse of that is also what are you guys looking for in terms of experience with clients coming in the door?
Great questions. Well, I guess from my side, what are we looking for in terms of clients, climbers to join our team? That's easy for me. We're looking for good people that are ready to be an asset on a strong team and support each other on the journey to the summit and back. Obviously, there's a baseline of experience we want to see on one's climbing resume. And at a minimum, that would be a couple smaller glaciated peaks, mountaineering courses on Mount Baker or Mount Rainier, and then some intermediate sized peaks like the Ecuador volcanoes, Cotopaxi, Cayambe, Chimborazo, which is just over 20,000 feet. Success there and good exposure to altitude on glaciated terrain, some technical terrain, and then a bigger expedition or two like Aconcagua or Denali, 6,000 meter mountain of a duration of 2 to 3 weeks where you're feeling like you're on an expedition. You're away from home for a significant amount of time. You've been on expedition life. And in Denali, there's no substitute for it. And what's so cool about Denali is it hasn't changed much in the last few decades, whereas other mountains have evolved considerably. On Denali, there still are no porters or Sherpas or yaks or mules or other means of support or fixed camps with services. So each climber, each team has to essentially be self-sufficient and haul all of their kit, food and fuel in and out of the mountain and climb it themselves. So I think Denali is just an irreplaceable mountain to climb and to train for Everest. Whereas Aconcagua has become, I'd say, quite a bit easier, maybe more pleasurable with the fixed camps, the high level of support from the mules and the porters and guides on the mountain. It's much more comfortable now. So a combination of at least three different sets of peaks, some smaller glaciated climbs like Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Shuxen, or even Mont Blanc in Europe. Mount Elbrus could qualify. And then some intermediate peaks like a Vinson or Ecuador volcanoes, or peaks in Peru that are hitting that 6,000 meter mark. And then a couple of bigger expeditions, whether it's Aconcagua, Denali, or even a smaller 8,000 meter peak, a more accessible, easy peak like Manaslu or Choyu, which is a great option before heading off to Everest. So really a baseline technical skill set, and then good fitness for climbing, and then some expedition high altitude time as well. Putting those three areas together, I think, and feeling good about it all, not struggling in any one category, positions one very well for the trip to Mount Everest.
And there's been a lot of talk recently of a new requirement that may be implemented in 2027 in Nepal for climbing a 7,000-meter peak, specifically in Nepal, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think this has been in the news recently. So I wanted to ask you about that. Is that something that you expect to happen in 2027? Is it going to be enforced? And if so, will you guys offer trips to other sort of open up your trips a little more to other 7,000-meter peaks in Nepal, Barunse being one of them, or some of these kind of a little more on the technical side mountains?
Great questions. Yeah, and I think this started recently with China requiring climbers who wanted to climb an 8,000 meter peak in Tibet, Choyu, Shishapangma, or Everest from the north side, to have been to a 7,000 meter peak prior. Um, and our answer to that is Peak Lenin. So we've got a Peak Lenin trip going this summer for folks that want to do a 7,000 meter mountain and get some great high altitude and technical experience. And then for Nepal, the big announcement of potential legislation requiring a 7,000 meter mountain in Nepal prior to going to Everest, that would be really interesting. And I think it's a great idea to ensure that there's at least some baseline of experience and capability with folks going to Everest if they haven't done these other peaks that I suggested earlier. Our answer to that is Himlung. We're going to offer Himlung, which is a peak in Western Nepal, closer to Manaslu,
Hmm.
which is over 7,000 meters and would satisfy that requirement if it is passed into law and
Hmm.
required before going to Everest.
Okay. Um, and are there, would you say there's 8,000-meter mountains that, um, I know you mentioned Choi Yu, um, other 8,000-meter mountains as sort of a stepping stone to Mount Everest. Is that worthwhile? And also maybe they're at a little bit of a lower price point for people if they're interested in exploring the Himalaya. So you guys are offering trips to Choi Yu and other 8,000-meter peaks as well.
Yes, typically post monsoon, so September, October, after the summer monsoon season. We've been to Choi Yu. I've been to Choi Yu personally the last 2 years in September, October, and we've had great trips there. It's usually a little bit drier on the north side of the Himalayas in Tibet, and it's also getting colder as winter's approaching. And that base camp at Choi Yu is pretty high. It's almost 19,000 feet, so it gets very cold at night there and the days are getting shorter. But it's a beautiful climb, wonderful route on the mountain, probably the safest 8,000 meter mountain, in my opinion, out there. And it doesn't get the traffic that Manaslu receives these days, just because it's more expensive and a little bit more difficult to get access. Unfortunately, as we all probably know, the north side of Everest is closed this spring. Tibet's closed to foreign climbers, and that could very well be extended and continue into the future for the autumn season, the post-monsoon season, or next year. We just don't know. But we're hoping they'll reopen for the fall season so we can go back to Choi Yu this September. And Manaslu is a very good option as well. That's in Western Nepal. Manaslu is seeing probably 400 foreign climbers every season now in September, and at least that many support staff, Nepal Sherpas or other high altitude workers there. So it's getting quite busy as an alternative to Choi Yu, but also a good 8,000 meter peak stepping stone on the road to Everest.
And I remember looking out at Choi Yu from Camp 3 on Everest and thinking, wow, that's a beautiful mountain out there. Identifying it as one of those kind of on the easier side 8,000-meter peaks, I think is really helpful, and something for people to keep in mind, especially if permitting and everything like that in China and Tibet becomes reliable. I know it's a little unpredictable right now, and yes, the north side was closed sort of late in the game this year, and we had quite a few folks who have had to pivot to the south side or delay their trips for a season. So something to consider for people that are looking at Everest or other 8,000-meter peaks. There can be some unpredictability with these sorts of things. And to flip the question back kind of the other direction, what should climbers who are interested in Everest or every Everest Lhotse combo be looking for in a guide service? I mean, it seems like there's so many different options out there these days of different types of trips that you can sign up for. So yeah, I guess just what are some of the considerations that potential climbers should look for as they're selecting guides?
Great question. And you're right, there are a plethora of options out there. There's a spectrum, really, from one end to the other of operators, guide companies, and guides offering various services for an Everest expedition. And at the one end, you probably have a more logistics operation providing basic services like climbing permits, logistics getting up to the mountain, perhaps some oxygen, Sherpa support, or other amenities. But really, more do it yourself, make your own decisions, climb on your own time type of program. And that can work great for climbers that have a lot of experience in the mountains and have been to high altitude on their own and feel very confident and capable making their own decisions at high altitude. And we see those climbers out there from time to time. Um, and we could probably list a couple right now, like Kilian Jornet would definitely fall into that camp. Someone who is very capable and confident in the mountains, and who just really needs some basic support services to enable him to run to the top and back safely. At the other end of the spectrum, there's companies like mine and others that provide a very comprehensive experience and help people on the journey to the mountain, as well as, of course, in Nepal from the start all the way to the finish. A more comprehensive, holistic approach to the mountain, making sure preparation is in order, both technical, high altitude experience, fitness training, equipment, nutrition, mindset, and then also going to Nepal, going up the mountain. And our team, what really differentiates our team is we climb together as a team.
Mm.
And that said, we're not all walking in lockstep up the mountain. We typically start off around the same time, say from base camp to camp one, but we spread out so everyone can walk their own pace with at least a guide in the front, guide in the back, maybe one guide floating, and Sherpas throughout the group. And we try to regroup at the breaks and also at the camps when we arrive. Um, so we're keeping an eye on each other and supporting each other, but that way everyone can walk their own pace, and the stronger, faster climbers don't have to feel like they're being held back and forced to go slower. And the folks that want to walk their own pace a little bit slower, take their time, they're not feeling rushed like they have to catch up or pick up the pace. So I find that works really well for everyone. But then regrouping as we can up the mountain and supporting each other. And I feel like that support network, that reassurance, and really it comes down to problem solving, right? If an issue comes up, whether it's weather, storm on the mountain, conditions related, or an equipment malfunction, or if it's just someone's confidence, their mindset, perhaps they're dealing with anxiety, having a supportive team network there is really powerful. And I think ultimately makes us stronger and more successful in accomplishing our goal and coming back safely. So that's really kind of the differentiator for us within that spectrum of guide company offerings.
Unpredictable things do happen too. It's almost something you should expect going into these climbs, right? Every season is a little different. There's always some, hazard that comes up kind of unexpected. Being able to work through that as a team, is so crucial to success on Everest. And maybe the weather window's a little later than you expect, so you're stuck waiting a long time at base camp, or there's a problem in the ice fall at the base, and you have to, wait for that to get figured out. And so yeah, staying mentally focused and also being able to work through the inevitable problems that arise is really important. And it sort of leads me into our next subject, which is training and preparation for Everest and Lhotse. And this is a long, arduous climb. It is about a month at least for most folks, depending on how long, if you're approaching via helicopter, if you're doing the full trek and things like that. But most people are departing at the beginning of April, and the summit season is mid to late May. So, door to door, this is a really long trip. It's at high altitude a lot of the time, so it's degrading. You're losing muscle mass. You probably lose a little bit of weight. You often pick up illness along the way. So, preparing yourself as best you can for this physically is so, so important. And, at Evoke, we have so much knowledge that we share about training, and this is really what we focus on as coaches. Scott loves to say, no one was ever too fit to climb a mountain. And I think you should be in the best shape of your life going to climb Mount Everest. So I just want to take a moment here, if we could talk a little bit about training. And Garrett, you've seen so many climbers on Everest over the years and seen really what it takes. I mean, you know what it takes physically, personally, and you've also seen it from so many of your clients and climbers over the years, as well as guides that work for you and Sherpa. So yeah, is there anything that you see as something common that people overlook in their training that they're missing when they get to Everest? Like where do the people who are not successful, is there a commonality in where they fail?
Well, I think there's no substitute for time spent on the mountain and hopefully with a heavy backpack training. I think that's the best activity, hands down, to prepare for Everest. Just getting out there, shouldering that rucksack and hiking up the trail and then back down. Um, but if we don't have access to trails or mountains nearby, and we have to train in a controlled environment in a gym, say. I think having a trainer like yourself to work with is so valuable. And one that's probably the biggest change in the last 20 years are the availability of training services like yours and Evoke that provide a comprehensive fitness training plan for climbers heading off to Everest or other big peaks. And folks that are limited to training in the gym, a very controlled environment, hopefully they can still get enough variety to mix it up and feel like they have the confidence once they get out onto the trail where it's a little bit more unstable and unpredictable.
I feel so terrible when I prescribe 3 hours of hiking on a treadmill or a stair machine, man. I just feel terrible prescribing that to my, to my athletes. But sometimes there's no way around it. Sometimes, you just don't have access to the outdoor terrain, and it is highly effective. So you better get some good shows, or listen to this podcast while you're on the machine, or you
That's
probably need
right.
you probably need it several entire series to get through your training preparation for Everest if it's going to be indoors. But I couldn't agree with you more that hiking uphill, sometimes carrying weight, and just that that very functional direct transfer to mountaineering that you have from hiking. It's, climbing Everest, that's most of what you're doing. And so building that huge aerobic engine with a big base phase to build up your capacity, and then starting to layer on the harder work is so important. The one, just to answer my own question, flip it back on myself of, one of the things that I notice between people that are successful on Everest and those that aren't is the people that really train well for Everest, they orient their entire lives toward this goal. It's not this isn't a tourist activity This is a challenging, difficult physical endeavor, and your training needs to match that for you to do well on Everest. So it's not something that you can kind of just add on the side to everything else that's going on. And I work with folks that have three children, a full-time job, and every demand of normal life, and they're successful because they show up every single day for months and months and months and years often on end, and they don't miss workouts. Occasionally, if they're sick, sure, like let's get healthy before we train again. But for the most part, they're consistent over a long run, and they sort of put blinders on and focus on this one goal and just check those workouts off day after day after day. And that's how you build that big aerobic engine that you need up on Mount Everest, and that reserve of fitness that you need that's going to get degraded over the course of the expedition at altitude. So if you're thinking about Everest, know that it's not just this month and a half expedition, it's also the preparation that goes into it and the singular focus on this goal. Um, you really got to put those blinders on and lock in.
Right, right. And I'd like to add to that. One aspect that might not be instantly recognizable to folks who are embarking on this months-long training program prior to going to Everest is when they build up their physical capabilities, there's also a mental capability that accompanies that. And hopefully, after a few months of the training, the mental framework, the mindset gets to a place where it's actually very content and happy to be trudging uphill with a heavy backpack, which normally would be considered suffering. But no, it's now become a happy place and within the comfort zone, and the ability to do that day in, day out, and be in that positive mental state and have a great attitude is so important. I think that is the biggest difference. Once um, our bodies and minds become adapted to this new mode of living, this harder reality, then we can take on just about anything.
It's a good call out because if you love the training, you're going to be successful. If it's not just a means to an end, but you actually fall in love with the act of training and going out, like you said, it's stress relief. Absolutely. Go out for a run, go out for a hike outdoors. Great way to, just kind of take your mind off things, go out and go with the flow. And then yeah, you get to the trek and oh, it's natural. I'm in this mode already. This is just fitting back into the pattern that I've already created, the routine that I've already created in my life. Actually, the trek feels easy, man. Come on.
Right. Right,
Uh,
right, totally. No, I would liken that to the day one for me of a Denali or Mount Vincent expedition, where we're starting off from base camp with the
oh,
maximum load in the pack and the sled, and we're heading uphill, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is what it's like to be carrying this 50, 60 pound pack and 50-pound sled. Oh, welcome back to the pain cave. And then within a couple hours, oh yeah, I remember this isn't so bad. Once I make friends with this new place that I'm in and it starts to become comfortable, then everything seems manageable. But sometimes it takes a little time to reacquaint myself with that existence.
oh yeah, the lower Kahiltna with the heavy bags on Denali and the heavy sled, man. That's a shock load to the system, I think. But the entry into Everest is a little smoother, and we might as well just begin our journey up the mountain here. Um, so you've selected a guide service. You've trained and prepared for a long time for this goal, and now you're heading out the door. The travel for most of us, is pretty long to get to Nepal for many folks. Expect some jet lag along the way. Try to take care of yourself and especially protect yourself from picking up an illness along the way. Um, just to touch back on training quickly, you can often train right up until near your departure for Everest, even within a couple days, because the trek tends to act as a natural taper, with the days, yes, being, sometimes long and time on your feet, but not necessarily overly vigorous or creating a ton of fatigue along the way. So you land in Kathmandu, you've traveled across the world, and you meet your team maybe at the Yak and Yeti Hotel or one of the hotels there in Kathmandu. Everyone's got their 60-pound, multiple 60-pound duffel bags, and the gear explosion happens. Um, yeah, like, could you just walk us through those kind of meeting the team and the first stages of the trip?
Absolutely. Yeah. After traveling halfway around the world, for most of us coming from North America, we converge in Kathmandu, which is a very interesting, engaging city. Blend of cultures, religions, and centuries, if not millennia of history. Very fascinating place to be, but we all congregate on the Akinyeti, exactly. The climbers hang out and we meet each other, do a quick orientation, jump right into our gear checks, make sure all the clothing, equipment, everything everyone was supposed to bring actually made it to Nepal. Fortunately, these days, there are a lot of good gear shops. If somebody's missing something or if a duffel bag gets lost in transit, like we can pretty much outfit an entire climber's kit in Kathmandu these days, which is great. So after we get the gear sorted and packed away, we'll often do a team dinner, and everyone's very excited and looking forward. Um, maybe a little anxious about the journey ahead, not knowing what to expect. Um, but looking forward to getting to know their teammates on the way. So after a night or two in Kathmandu, we fly into the Khumbu Valley and start the trek up to base camp. It's really nice to get up there into the mountains again. We don't spend too long in the city just because we're focused on the climb and being in the mountains. So maybe just a day there in Kathmandu, a couple quick tours around the city if there's time, but get up to Lukla, start trekking to base camp. It's so nice to be up there in the lush green valley and see the snow-capped peaks in the distance, have that fresh air. It's always a relief for me to get out of Kathmandu and get up to the Khumbu Valley and start trekking and exercising again. And then eventually getting that first glimpse of Everest once we get up around Namche. That's always really special. Sometimes that's the first time anyone's seen the mountain, and to get eyes on Everest and the summit at the top of the world there, it's pretty special. I remember when I first saw Everest back in 2003, and there was just something about it. From down there around 10,000 feet near Namche Bazaar, seeing Everest for the first time and realizing, wow, that's the top of the world. That's where I would love to get to someday.
We saw it the first time the same year. That was the first time I saw Everest myself, was in 2003 trekking with my family. Yeah,
Nice.
man, you're bringing me back, describing the valley. It's such a beautiful place. I know exactly what you mean about getting your boots on the trail and sort of the stress of travel and preparation just fades away. I've experienced that, and a lot of people I work with have as well, where, oh man, it's you get kind of anxious, and there's the rush of, travel and getting into Kathmandu and meeting everyone, and then everything becomes a lot simpler when you're just hiking closer and closer to Mount Everest every single day. Are most folks still landing at Lukla via small planes, or are more people taking helicopters these days? Is that still pretty standard, just flying from Kathmandu to Lukla?
It is, but there's two options now. During the season, the Kathmandu airport generally only allows helicopters to fly from Kathmandu to Lukla, which are a more expensive option. The fixed wing aircraft have to fly in and out of Ramachop Airport, which is 6 to 8 hours drive from Kathmandu. So you can still leave Kathmandu, drive overland to Ramachop, usually get there late in the evening, spend the night, and the next morning, first thing, 5, 6 a.m., hopefully hop on a Twin Otter flight from there up to Lukla to start the trek. So either helicopter or fixed wing. But like you said, yeah, everyone seems to breathe a sigh of relief once they get up to Lukla and the Khumbu Valley, back in the mountains, on the trail. Got the journey ahead out of the city. It's such a great feeling. And for those that are lucky enough to get to do the trek to base camp, because these days not everyone has the time. A lot of climbers are limited by time constraints with work and family and other obligations. So for them, it works better to pre-acclimatize at home with hypoxico system or another system, and then fly into base camp or just below base camp to start the Everest expedition, missing out on the trek. But I would say if you haven't done the trek before, it's just such a special experience. And for a lot of people, a bucket list journey to walk through the fabled Khumbu Valley and past the Sherpa villages that have been there for centuries, and the monasteries as well. It's just such a hallowed and unique and magical experience. I think the trek to base camp is very worthwhile in its own right.
It's such a spiritual place. It's so beautiful. And yes, if you haven't done the trek, it's absolutely well worth it in its own right. I completely agree. And maybe this would be a great spot to hop off and just take a little tangent on pre-acclimatization, because this is something I think that's on a lot of people's minds. So, don't need to spend too long, but pre-acclimatization, you mentioned, right, if you're not pre-acclimatizing with a hypoxico or another altitude simulator, you are landing in Lukla, which is about 9,000 feet or so, and then starting your trek up to Everest Base Camp. And uh, Everest Base Camp about 17,500. And so there's a lot of elevation gain there. There's a lot of adaptations that need to happen in your body to get used to that, lack of oxygen up there. So, hypoxico, like yes or no, pre-acclimatize, is it required? What's your impression of using the altitude simulators to pre-acclimatize?
Well, I think they are an incredibly useful tool for those that need them. Because I'm starting from Lukla and trekking up to base camp, and others who are doing that with me. That's our natural way to acclimatize. And we should be okay on our schedule of 8 to 10 days trekking up to Everest Base Camp. We take a few rest days on the way, do acclimatization hikes. But as long as we're taking good care of ourselves, we should be able to acclimate naturally on the schedule. For those that are either limited by their time and can't do that trek to base camp, or they just want to give themselves additional benefits and advantages going into the expedition, I think Hypoxico or another altitude simulator system is a great idea in building the red blood cells, the hemoglobin, the body's ability to increase its oxygen carrying capacity ahead of time. But there's some things that it can't train for, like the change in barometric pressure, which we're not sure we understand completely, and also just the environment of being in a different place, being up in the Khumbu Valley on a dusty trail or a cold day, breathing in that cold, dry air, walking on uneven terrain. There's different things going on there. So I think there is a lot of value in the Hypoxico or altitude simulators. Um, but I think ultimately, if you can, the trek into base camp is a great way to get to the mountain feeling strong and acclimatized naturally.
Very well put. I think for a rapid ascent, an express ascent, or if you're helicoptering to base camp or Farache or somewhere up on the trek, um, it's almost required, right, to be able to go to that altitude that quickly. So if you have limited time, like you said, yes, you better pre-acclimatize, or else you're gonna feel like I don't think you can even do it. You better pre-acclimatize. If you're not, if you're on a normal schedule, I think of it a little more as like a cherry on top or a garnish on your preparation. The meat and potatoes is the training. It's the hiking. It's 3 hours on a stair machine. Sorry, with a backpack. And then the hypoxico is a garnish. It's a cherry on top. It can make it a little easier to adapt. One thing that I've heard from a lot of athletes I've worked with that have used it is their adaptations happen more quickly. They, feel a lot better on day two, day three than they normally would, even as you're gaining elevation and making it up, toward Namche or Tengboche. And also that it sort of saves their immune system a little bit. Maybe prevents them from being so susceptible to picking up an illness, which can be a real problem on the south side in Nepal of picking up some sort of illness, respiratory or GI, along the trek, and that can really sap your energy going into your climb. In fact, if you can get to base camp clean and healthy, that's a huge advantage, or it's really something that you should absolutely try to, accomplish along the way if you can get in there clean. If you get sick, not a big deal. I've been sick every time. So it happens. You can, yeah, like it happens. You can get over it. So don't think that, oh, I picked up a stomach illness. My trip's over. Absolutely not. You can recover from that. You can get healthy again and continue to climb. So don't think that. But if your immune system's a little less susceptible because you're not under the stress of acclimatizing as much, then hey, that could be a benefit of pre-acclimatizing. Um, so yeah, any other thoughts on hypoxico?
Yeah, for those using Hypoxico or an altitude simulator, I've always brought up that they should make sure they're getting enough quality recovery time, sleep at night, um, to ensure that their body is able to repair and build back stronger. Um, I think sustained nights at high altitude definitely wear us down, and so getting that good recovery time is very important. But also, I'm hearing now more climbers who are using the altitude simulator systems are using the high altitude adapters to train with for, say, 1, 2, 3 hours at 21,000 feet, and then not sleeping so high in the altitude tent and getting more benefit from that strategy, training hard with the altitude simulator and then getting really good recovery sleep, perhaps even at sea level. I think that's so important to get that good recovery time, going into the expedition, not being stressed and just ensuring that your body is fully rested and immune system is high, starting the journey to base camp.
Thank you for mentioning the importance of recovery and sleep. Oh, it's so important and it's so crucial in that final phase of training when everything's really hard, your training's at its peak. And like you said, if you're also trying to sleep at 16,000 feet of simulated altitude, your recovery is just going to be crushed. And all of a sudden, your body starts to break down. You're not adapting to the workouts. You start your workouts feeling tired or exhausted, means you get less out of the workout. You get a less quality workout because of it. So, absolutely, sleep and recovery is crucial. I had Brian Ostrike, the CEO of Hypoxico, on the podcast in the past. Folks can look back at our logs and check that out. And he was really informative of how to use the machines, and just like you said, he said for his personal use, he'll often not set as high a target for sleeping, but then use it during intermittent exposure during training or even just passive exposure where he's able to get the altitude a little bit higher. So it's kind of a shorter dose, but a more powerful dose, whereas the sleeping is that long dose. And so he said, I think his phrase was, it's descriptive, not prescriptive. So we want to describe what you're going for. We want to create these certain adaptations in your body, but also don't stick to a hard protocol. Don't set an altitude goal necessarily that you want to get to sleeping. Try to create those adaptations. Try to boost your carrying capacity, your oxygen carrying capacity in your blood, while also still getting the recovery you need to train and to prepare. Because the training is still the most important. The training's still the most important part, man. We got to
Totally.
hammer that drum, right? So,
Right, right.
um, well, this is great. I did want to ask you one specific thing, and this is partly for my information, but also ties into what I was saying about not picking up an illness on the trek. What's your go-to order at a tea house along the way? Your go-to food order? Like what's your like favorite that you like to get along the way?
Well, there's some lodges that do a really nice, simple margarita pizza, just like tomato and cheese on top of the pizza bread. And for me, that's great. If I'm feeling adventurous, I might go for the tuna pizza or the chicken pizza, but usually just keeping it simple, tomato cheese pizza. That's my go-to.
Yeah, it's a good call out because it's like the tea houses, it's kind of can be confusing. Like, what do I order? And you're staying in these beautiful houses along the way. You're really in people's homes.
Yeah.
But uh so kind of like you said, is like keep it simple. Let's not go with the yak sizzler on the trek in. Save that for your celebratory
Right.
meal after the trip. Keep it simple, keep yourself healthy on the way in. Another little tip there is always have a little bit of hand sanitizer in a pocket and just, be aware of washing your hands and try to keep your hygiene really good on the trek in so that you can get in clean to base camp.
Definitely. And just to reiterate on those points, yeah, I think keeping the food simple, whether it's pizza or veg momos or Tibetan bread, those are all very simple options. And then the hand sanitizer, can't stress how important that is all the time. People from all over the world are converging on the Khumbu Valley during the time period of April and May and sharing all of the bacteria they've brought from home or collected en route to Nepal. And it's this petri dish of mixing bacteria and viruses and other stuff. So the more you can isolate yourself, protect yourself from contracting something from another person or something that might be in the air or on a table countertop, the better off you'll be. And one thing one of our climbers, Susan, did last year to prevent herself from getting sick, a respiratory illness, was she wore one of the air trim masks on the trek to base camp and throughout the expedition just to protect all of the air she was inhaling.
Mm.
And she never got sick. So remarkable how well it worked for her. So that's another way. I try to wear my buff as much as possible, just over my face when I'm trekking up the trail in the Khumbu Valley. That dust gets kicked up, and in a lot of the tea houses in the villages, they're burning yak dung as they have always done to heat their homes. And that smoke is in the air occasionally. So between the dust and the smoke and just the cold, dry air, that can be a big stress on our respiratory system, on our airway. And as soon as we tip into the point where our body realizes we need to protect the airway, we start producing mucus to coat the airway. Well, then we start coughing the mucus up, right? And spitting it out. And it becomes this cycle where now we're coughing and we're actually aggravating our airway more. And then we've all heard of the Khumbu cough, right? This cough that nobody wants to get, but once you get it, it's tough to get rid of, right? Tough to shake it. So protecting that airway from day one. And this also goes back to Kathmandu. I would not recommend anyone go out for a run on the streets of Kathmandu unless there's been a monsoon rain the night before to clean out the air. But typically the air quality is not great in Kathmandu. So no exercising outside, only in the hotel gym. And then once we get up in the Khumbu Valley, be very mindful of your airway, keeping it covered, protected whenever possible on the trail. Even at night sleeping, I'll try to keep the buff up over my face, but I think that air trim mask is a great idea. Lozenges at night just to keep the airway moistened, waking up, sipping on hot tea, all of those things can help keep us healthy and that airway protected during the expedition.
Those are such great tips, such good reminders for everyone, even if you're just trekking to base camp to try to keep yourself healthy along the way. And it makes me think of another thing that I tell a lot of folks is, um, you know, don't prove your fitness on the trek. This is not the time to, show off and show everyone how strong you are. It's the time to let your body adapt to the altitude, take in the sights and the sounds, and get to base camp in the best possible shape with as much fitness in your bank account as you possibly can have. And so, I think there's a tendency for a lot of people when you've been training for a year, this is something that you have been dreaming about your entire life. You're with a new group of people, a team of folks that you may have met for the first time. And so there's kind of a feeling out of each other, and there can be some competitive spirits that go on and on treks often. And, everyone feels like, hey, I'm really fit. I've trained really well, and I want to prove my fitness. Hey, save that for summit day. The trek is not the time to do that. Like, slot in behind the guide, follow that nice guide pace. Keep it gentle because your body's going through a lot of stress of travel, fighting off illness, getting to a new altitude. There's plenty of stress already happening without, you know, increasing your exertion. So I just say, hey, man, take up the rear and protect yourself. And so yeah, don't waste your fitness on the trek. Keep it for the climb.
I agree 100%. I think it's so important to conserve throughout the duration of the expedition. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon in the sense that it's a 6 week mountaineering expedition, and you have to save your energy for what comes last at the end, which is getting to the summit and having the strength to get down safely. So just conserving when at all possible and not exerting. Um, Definitely important to follow throughout.
So you've trekked for, say, 10 days and made it up to a good high altitude now. Is the first, so this is where it's okay, either we go to base camp or now folks are climbing Lobuche East often as a first rotation. Is that what you guys do
Yeah,
for your
yeah.
first
That's one of
rotation?
the newer options we've put into our program. So after the 8 or 10 day trek to base camp, we settle into base camp for a few days, and it's really nice to get to base camp because we've been on the go in the valley, staying in different lodges, which are all very beautiful and have their own character and viewpoints. But once we get to base camp, we're home, right? We can kind of move in, and we don't have to think about packing up our sleeping bag the next morning and stuffing it back in the duffel bag, where we get to set up how we want to have everything. And we have our own space there for dining, bathroom, showers, communications tent. Everyone's got their own personal tent, which is like a box style stand-up tent, table, chair, bed, and vestibule outside to store duffel bags and boots and whatnot. So it's a nice home to base out of for the duration of the expedition, a month or a few weeks if you're on the express program. And once we get there and settle in, it's also a nice sigh of relief because um, we're insulated. We're in our bubble. We're not going to be sharing our camp, our dining facilities with other people. Whereas on the trek to base camp, we're in these tea houses and there's other people coming and going, staying there, sharing the dining room space. So it is nice to get to base camp. Once we settle in, we start our technical review training. I like to assume that everyone has forgotten everything they know about technical mountaineering. And so we start from zero and just pull out all of our gear, harness, crampons, ice axe, helmet, our technical gear, ascender, belay rappel devices, carabiners, and we make sure we're all rigged up properly. And then we go out onto the Khumbu Glacier there, right next to base camp. And as you remember, it's a beautiful sight to see and an incredible venue for training. There's all of these ice towers, and we can set up a course every morning to incorporate fixed line travel, climbing steep vertical ice walls on fixed lines, and then traversing those fixed lines and then descending, rappelling or belaying someone down. And it's wonderful training, both from a technical perspective to review all of that, relearn it for some, and remaster it. And then also it's great team building because we're working together during these training systems and helping each other, sometimes on belay. And then also it's great acclimatization. There's no better substitute to acclimatize than getting a little exercise at that altitude. We always try to climb high, sleep low. Also in the hypoxico system, you train high and then sleep low works very well. We're moved into base camp now, so we're sleeping at 17.5. We have to be careful we don't overtrain during the day. But it's a great way to brush up on technical skills, work on that team building, getting to know each other, and also building our acclimatization. After a few days of that, then we head down to climb Lobuche Peak. And this is in place of what used to be the first rotation up through the Khumbu Icefall to Camp 1, Camp 2. It seemed like there was a general consensus that people feel the Khumbu Icefall is dangerous, which it is, of course. I think statistically, Everest North side is still more deadly than the south side per summits. You'd have to ask Alan Arnett or someone who really keeps track of those stats. But the Khumbu Icefall is a dangerous place. I've been through it probably over 100 times now, and hopefully get to go through at least a few more times. I enjoy it. I think it's very fun, engaging, keeps you on your toes. It's always changing. You have to adapt to the terrain, and it's never the same twice. The ladders, the ropes, the crevasses to step across. It's all very interesting and I think very fun. But anyways, our training in base camp is to build up for that. First, though, we go down and climb Lobuche Peak, which takes 3-4 days round trip. And Lobuche Peak is a great way to get up to a little bit higher elevation and also incorporate some of those technical skills at altitude. It's essentially a great warm-up peak before moving back to Everest Base Camp and focusing on climbing up through the Khumbu Icefall to Camp 1, Camp 2, and even touching Camp 3. So ideally, we go off to Lobuche Peak, get a summit of Lobuche East. It's not the true summit, but a great viewpoint and a very fun climb in its own right. And hopefully we build some acclimatization on the way and just put our skills to work, our systems to work for climbing. And then back to base camp, take a few days to reorganize and maybe brush up on some additional technical training and make sure we're feeling good about this first rotation. And then we all move up through the ice fall together. We start off probably 2 a.m. And like I said before, one of the nuances of our team is we all try to climb at our own pace. So we're not necessarily walking together in lockstep. We spread apart during the day. And I think that also works well for efficiency, moving through the ice fall and safety, because we don't want to all bunch up, say, behind a hanging tower of ice. We want to move through what we perceive to be a danger zone swiftly and efficiently and get to an area of safety, an area of the ice fall we feel is not exposed to objective hazard like rock fall or serac fall or an avalanche from above, and take our breaks there in the safe zone. Same thing as on a rainier climb, right? We take breaks where we feel it's a safe spot to do so. Um, and then getting up to Camp One, spending a couple nights at Camp One. We're about 2,000 feet above base camp there. So like to acclimatize a bit in Camp One there on the Western Khumbu. And then move up to Camp Two, advanced base camp at about 21.3 near the base of the Lhotse face, spend a couple of nights there. And even on our rest days there in Camp One or Camp Two, we always try to get out in the morning after breakfast for a hike to work on our acclimatization, just keep our bodies moving. I don't think it's good to lay in the tent all day and be lethargic. I think it really is detrimental to our physical and mental state. So just getting out of the tent each morning, going for a hike, moving the body, having that blood flow throughout, oxygenated blood throughout the body is very healthy. And then after a couple nights at Camp Two, we try to climb up and touch Camp Three on the Lhotse face. That's the final test in that first rotation. And it's super fun, as you remember, climbing up the Lhotse face, crossing the Bergstrand there at the base, getting onto the steep ice, working our way up to Camp Three, usually hanging out for an hour or two, taking a break, having lunch. And that's one of my favorite all-time views that I've ever seen in my life. Gazing out from Camp Three over the Western Khumbu, got Nuptse on the left, Everest on the right, and Choyu and some other peaks, Kumori in the far distance. Just an incredible spot to take it all in.
Thank you for taking us on that journey, Garrett. That was awesome. I just made a few notes along the way because I wanted to touch on a few things. You said the Khumbu Icefall is a beautiful place to train. The base of the Khumbu Icefall there, right near base camp. You called the Khumbu Icefall beautiful. I call it terrifying. Um, no, but it's funny you said. I actually find it fun. I remember one of my first trips through there with Dave Hahn. We got up kind of on the last couple ladders, that big ditch at the top, uh, to crest into the Western Coombe. And I remember we were kind of paused there looking down into this amazingly enormous crevasse that we were climbing down into with some plugs and things we were crossing over. And I said, "Man, it looks fun. It's like a jungle gym." And he kind of gave me a sideways look and said, "Yeah, it's sure fun if it couldn't kill me so bad." So it is fun and also a little scary. I think there's, a mental challenge to going through the ice fall with the amount of objective hazard in there and sort of the unpredictable nature of that place. Um, any tips for just staying like mentally kind of locked in when you're in that sort of environment?
Yeah, I think just focusing on one step at a time is so important, right? Just being totally engaged in whatever it is we're doing in that moment, whether it's climbing up a steep ice slope on the fixed rope or crossing a ladder. People always ask, well, how do you do it? How do you focus for these ladder crossings? Well, first of all, we practice in base camp. We'll rig up some ladder system examples to practice on so that we're familiar with it and feeling confident. But there's no substitute for actually doing it up there when you're crossing a crevasse that's 8, 10 feet wide. Sometimes even wider. Sometimes they'll have 4 or 5 ladders lashed together across maybe a 40-foot crevasse that's also very, very deep. And the one thing I would say don't do is don't look down at the bottom of the crevasse between the rungs of the ladder. Always focus on that ladder, exactly where the next footstep's going. Just staying present, staying in the moment, fully engaged and in control is so important.
One foot in front of the other. Absolutely. Yeah, focus on the next step. That's exactly what I would say as well. And, if you're constantly thinking of the potential hazards in there, you're not going to be able to move. And movement is safety in the Khumbu Icefall. Fitness is safety in the Khumbu Icefall. So being able to move efficiently, fast, yes, but more than that, just efficiently. Just move through there with efficiency and get up to the other side into the Western Coombe. Um, yeah, it's a scary endeavor. I like that you can go to Lobuche Peak, get a rotation done there. Plus, that's a sounds like a cool climb. Like
It is.
on it's kind of a little side quest to Lobuche. And then you do a rotation up through the ice fall, like you said, up to Camp 2, spending a few nights along the way to get used to those new altitudes. Try to get up and touch Camp 3, have lunch up there, take in the view. Man, that sunset from Camp 3 over Choyu, that's something else. I think it's one of the
Mhm.
most beautiful things I remember from my expeditions up there. Um, and then right, you go back down all the way back down the mountain to base camp. And that's something that surprises a lot of people. Like I remember, tell people about this and it's like, yeah, you go a good portion of the way up the mountain. I mean, you're up 24,000 feet or something like that, Camp 3, and then you head all the way back to base camp. This is what we mean by a rotation. You're training your body to perform better at a higher altitude. And to do that, we have to climb high and sleep low and push our body to a new altitude and then come back down to rest and recover. So we've done one trip up Lobuche Peak. Now you've gone on your kind of second rotation, but first rotation on Everest, then all the way back to base camp, right? Is that a pretty standard, those usually the two cycles that folks do, and then the summit rotation is the next one?
Yes, exactly. That's probably the current general way of thinking to acclimatize on an Everest expedition, except for the folks that are on the compressed timeline, the express program or rapid ascent, where they've pre-acclimatized at home using the Hypoxico system or similar altitude simulator, and then fly into the Khumbu Valley, maybe just below base camp to Ferice or Lobuche, spend the night or two, then truck up to base camp, join the rest of the team um, that's just completed the Lobuche rotation, and then going together on that first rotation up to Camp 1, Camp 2 to Camp 3 all together, coming down from that rotation. And to me, that rotation is so important, not just from a physiological perspective to ensure the body can adapt to the altitude and is now recovering from that climb up high and preparing for the next round, but also just mentally to be comfortable and prepared and efficient dealing with climbing through the Khumbu icefall, up the Western Coombe, and up the Lhotse face. I think having that hands-on, real-world experience just does wonders for us in terms of knowing what to expect, feeling confident about the next round, which is the final summit push, climb up the mountain. So I think that's so important to complete that first rotation. After the first rotation, we can either stay in base camp to recover in our little bubble, or what's become very popular is to helicopter down to a lower elevation. Most folks on our team are choosing to go to Namche because it's low enough there at about 10,500 feet where they're feeling like they get great recovery, amazing sleep, and also their appetite spikes. So
Mm.
they're eating like double portions 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner in Namche and feeling great. You could also fly down to Kathmandu now and stay in a hotel there. I wouldn't recommend that because I've seen too many times climbers coming back with an illness that they picked up in Kathmandu. Our bodies have been worn down from extended time at high altitude and the cold and working hard. So our immune systems might not be as resilient as they normally are. So I would discourage going to Kathmandu and being surrounded by so many potential bugs that could get someone sick. We've even had a climber fly from Kathmandu the same day to another country, to Thailand, and stay at the Four Seasons in Koh Samui for 5 nights, and then fly back to Kathmandu, helicopter up, and join the group for the climb. So it is an option, but I would suggest staying in the Khumbu Valley if possible, just to keep the mindset, the focus on the mountain, but getting down to an elevation where you feel really good with your recovery, which would probably be around Namche Bazaar.
That's amazing that someone went and got some beach time. It's because it's what you dream of, right? Like you're up in a world of rock and ice. It's cold, it's harsh environment, and you're like dreaming of Oh, how nice it would be to be sipping a Mai Tai on a, on a beach somewhere. So I get the pull to get go do something like that, but I completely agree. It seems like staying present in that expedition in the Khumbu Valley, staying focused on the goal is so important. I don't think you can really kind of let yourself lose sight of what's in front of you. And this is even a problem I remember for us having to wait at base camp. When I climbed Everest, we didn't go back down lower in the valley. It wasn't as much of a common practice, and I think it's very wise. It's you know, like you said, your body recovers so much better with that thicker air down there, and you're all of a sudden you're able to recharge. Body can reach an equilibrium and be actually stable instead of under constant stress at such a high altitude, always struggling. So just, I bet even a couple days down there makes a world of difference for recovery. And then, you come back just primed for your summit attempt. Um, but just staying mentally in the game, I know can be really hard in this stage where we're at right now. Now we've done our rotations up the mountain. We've, acclimatized. We've prepared ourselves with all the technical skills. The camps are stacked up and ready to go. Oxygen bottles up on the mountain. And now it's kind of a waiting game in this stage sometimes, right? And we're looking for a weather window. We're trying to figure out where the crowding is going to happen and try to kind of thread the needle through all these things. So, this can be a hard stage for people mentally, I think, especially this right before the summit attempt. So what are the some of the considerations? I mean, I know, everyone's trying to push a little sooner in the season now, but you have so much experience up there, Garrett, and I know some of it just comes down to just knowing the mountain really well and the weather patterns. So, yeah, like how's your thought process on like picking a summit window and kind of giving yourself and your team the best chance to get up there?
Right. Well, that's the $1 million question, right? Everybody wants to be up there on the perfect day with no crowds, nobody else around, right? So, how do we achieve that? Great question. Well, going into the summer rotation, hopefully um, we've licked all of our wounds from our drop back down to Namche or similar recovery destination. No one's suffering from the Khumbu cough or another form of respiratory or GI illness. Hopefully, everyone's recovered. That last rotation helped with acclimatization. From a technical skill set viewpoint, everyone's brushed up on their ascending, descending of the fixed line and good footwork. So conserving energy throughout, and hopefully we're primed and ready and without too much anxiety. Now, that said, what has to happen on the mountain in advance of the summit push is the fixed lines have to go into the summit. And that's an endeavor, a project that occurs every year. Generally, one team is responsible for that. We used to do it 2017, 18, 19. But now it's another company and they're doing a great job. Hopefully they get the fixed lines in by early May. We never really know. Their Sherpas will be up there working during April trying to get the ropes in, but they need to have good weather, good conditions, and strong performance of their team to get those fixed lines in. But once the lines are in, that's great news. Then the route is open for everyone. And now we're watching the weather and we're also watching the other teams. Of course, we also have to make sure our own team is ready. All of our high camps are stocked with food, fuel, oxygen, and other equipment so that it's ready for us to come up and make our final push. Personally, I like to go a little bit later in the season. I feel like the folks that are making those summit attempts during the middle of May are taking some risks with potentially colder conditions. And I'm seeing a lot of cold injuries coming off on those early summit attempts. It's also human nature to not be patient, right? And to want to go take the first possible opportunity to make our attempt. So I feel like the earlier attempts there in early to mid-May are folks that are really not wanting to wait around and are perhaps a little anxious and impatient to make their summit attempt. I like to wait a little bit later, usually that second weather window around May 18 to 25 is where we're targeting our summit day. And typically by then, some of the teams have already cycled through, have made their attempts, hopefully summited, and are now on their way down or packing up to head out. And also, we notice a warming trend in the Himalayas really warms up a lot there towards the end of May, and the winds tend to drop way down. So between the combination of the warmer temperatures, lower wind speeds, hopefully a lot of climbers, a lot of teams have cleared out already, and conditions are looking great. So I've been very fortunate the last 4 or 5 years up there, virtually having the summit all to ourselves on what I would consider pretty much a near perfect day each time. Now, hopefully that lucky streak can be extended and continued, but nothing's guaranteed in life. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But typically we're targeting those later May days like 22, 23, 24, 25 of May before the approaching monsoon, which used to hit. I think you probably remember in 2009, I think the monsoon hit like May 25th, pretty hard. And it snowed a couple meters up there on Everest and shut down the mountain. You didn't want to be up there when that happened. But the last decade or so, it seems like that monsoon doesn't come until early June now, or even later into June, like June 8th or 10th or 15th. So we're seeing some really good weather extended through the end of May.
You're trying to hit the mark. You're trying to hit that perfect window right at the end of the season. It has to take some confidence and some patience, like you said, to know. And I remember this from my trip, seeing other teams summit, seeing the route open, and thinking, why aren't we up there? Why are we down here at base camp while these other teams are, beating the pots and pans and celebrating, summits. And so that, it takes a lot of leadership on your part, I think, to reassure folks and say, hey, look, no, like we're right in the right position. We're ready for this. Let's let these crowds get out of the way and let's hit one of these nice warm windows right at the end of the season. I think about my dad summiting on May 1st in 1963, and I'm like, man was wild. He was nuts. He was crazy. Like, it just walked right through the jet stream, I think.
Wow.
He said there's a storm on the mountain. It's like, no, Dad, that's just the jet stream. That's just the normal 70-mile-an-hour winds that are hitting that mountain all the time on May 1st, right? So,
Wow.
I summited on May 25th and 26th, my two summits, right there, like you're saying, right in that nice window at the end. So it takes a little bit of patience. You might be waiting at base camp a little while, spend a couple days at lower elevation. So finally the doors open, man. The window's coming. You're making your way up the mountain, back through the Khumbu icefall, up to Camp 2, now up the Lhotse face, climbing that steep terrain up to Camp 3. And usually from this point is where folks are starting to use bottled oxygen. Is that right? About Camp 3 and above is often where oxygen begins?
So we're starting a little lower these
Okay.
days. Yeah, I found that starting from Camp 2 on the summit push is very beneficial for us.
Mm.
And my belief, hands down, is that more oxygen is better for all of us on an Everest expedition. So I'm very bullish on oxygen. It just improves our overall experience so markedly. Everything from how we feel, right? If we feeling good happens on oxygen, and also how we perform, how we think. We make much better decisions with the brain on supplemental oxygen, and our appetite is increased, and our sleep is much better, much better. So we start off from Camp 2 on about 2 liters, maybe 2.5 liters flow rate of oxygen as we're heading out of Camp 2 up towards the Lhotse face, and we climb on that flow rate up until we reach Camp 3. Usually just feeling great, feeling amazing. And then we switch to a new bottle and sleep on oxygen that night in Camp 3, about a liter a minute, which feels amazing. Again, incredible recovery and very comfortable rest. And then the next day, starting out of Camp 3, we're on oxygen, a fresh cylinder, again, turning up the flow rate a little, 2.5, 3 liters a minute as we climb up and approach the yellow band. And after the yellow band, we generally switch to another bottle and then turn it up a little bit more, maybe 3.5 liters as we're going up past Lhotse High Camp and over the Geneva Spur into Camp 4 at the South Col. And then we arrive at High Camp there. As you know, there's nothing like it in the world. Camp 4 on Everest, the South Col. It's just a very barren, rugged place, but a beautiful, incredible place at the same time. And we move into Camp 4, and usually take a good rest there that evening, have dinner, rehydrate, switch to another bottle of oxygen for the night. And ideally, we take a full rest day there at Camp 4. And
Mm,
most teams do not do that. And I understand
mm.
why. It's an incredible amount of work to put all the resources in place to be able to take a full rest day there at Camp 4. You need more oxygen, more fuel, more manpower to melt ice for water and make hot drinks and cook food for people. So it's a big endeavor to take a full rest day. But I find the recovery works wonders up there at Camp 4 on oxygen. So we recover the whole next day and uh, rest up, eat, drink, and then leave that following night around midnight for the final summit push. Starting out at Camp 4, heading up towards the triangular face, get to the balcony, which is about the halfway point in terms of elevation and distance and also time. And then from the balcony, we're on that southeast ridge. Beautiful views looking off to the right over the Kangshung face into Tibet, and left south towards Nepal and India, and then make our way up towards the south summit, the false summit, and then down to the cave and across the summit ridge to the former Hillary Step, and then up the final slopes to the top of the mountain, hopefully arriving sometime mid-morning, maybe 9, 10 a.m. is typically ideal for us.
Wow. Listening to you describe this journey, it really, for me personally, highlights how things have progressed and changed on Everest since I was climbing there. Um, and you just been refined. And your systems are so good now. You understand the altitude way probably better than we did even 10 years ago. Um, and just hearing, hey, we're using these different flow rates at these different altitudes. And you mentioned spending an extra a whole day at the South Col. That's an interesting one because our thinking back then was more time at that altitude is just going to weaken you and make you weaker. So it's kind of like you go for the summit, you'd climb from Camp 3 to Camp 4, and then you'd have some rest there, but only really a matter of hours, and then you'd be going to the summit, which is pretty degrading as well, pretty exhausting. You have no recovery time. And I remember, we were kind of prevented from going that first night by crowds and by weather. And so we did end up spending a whole day at the South Col, breathing that slow drip oxygen in the tent and just trying to stay positive and
Right.
focused. Um, so that's a really interesting change to intentionally do that and kind of set yourself up for that. Do you find folks have ability to recover and just that extra day there gives them a chance to kind of collect themselves and then fire for the summit?
Totally. Yeah. And I have climbed it the way you described, where we arrive up at Camp 4 after pushing from Camp 3, which is a big day from Camp 3 to
Yeah.
Camp. Very strenuous day, long day. Pulling into Camp 4 at the South Col, nearly 8,000 meters, being exhausted. And like you said, only having a few hours to rest, recover, get organized, and then head out the door for the summit climb. Another huge day. So it is doable. It's tougher that way for sure.
Mm.
You have to be physically and mentally tougher, and I think better trained to perform well under those conditions. But having that rest day at Camp 4, oh my gosh, it does wonders for us in terms of recovery and re-energized for the summit push.
Yeah. And Garrett, with the use of oxygen, just curious to get your take on kind of the style discussion. Using no oxygen versus using oxygen. I just want to make the point that this isn't an ethical conversation. I think that word gets thrown around on Everest a lot, and this isn't. You're not harming anyone by using bottled oxygen, so it's not really in my view, an ethical conversation so much as it is a style conversation, if that makes sense. And, you know, I have climbed Everest with oxygen. We could point out little nuances and our flow rates that we used and things like that that I'm sure do make a big difference these days. But it was damn hard. Let me just say that. It wasn't easy with oxygen. So let me just diffuse that myth that somehow, climbing Everest is easy if you're using oxygen. But I just wanted to kind of get your take on that. I know it can be a little controversial, but I thought curious to hear your take on oxygen and no oxygen.
Right, right. Well, it's really interesting you bring that up. And I have great admiration for climbers like Ed Viesturs, Reinhold Messner that have climbed so many high altitude peaks, all 14, 8,000 meter peaks without the use of supplemental oxygen or really much support for that matter, doing it mostly on their own. Very impressive, very admirable. In terms of guiding expeditions and leading others, generally the oxygen supported ascent is what we're promoting and endorsing. However, I think now there's a new wave of climbers, client climbers that are looking to try Everest without using supplemental oxygen. So it'll be very interesting to see how that progresses. Personally, as an expedition leader, mountain guide, risk manager, decision maker, someone that needs to be able to come to the aid of others and help them during the climb at high altitude, I feel like I have to use supplemental oxygen just to give myself every advantage and every bit of help to be capable up there to assist my team and others. So for me, I need to use oxygen, and I feel like more is better. The higher the flow rate, the better we feel, the stronger we are, the more capable we are. So again, I'm very bullish on oxygen, and I feel like you're either using it or you're not, right? If you're using it, hopefully it's working for you. Depending on your body mass, how big you are, you might need more oxygen. All right, a small person gets more value out of that flow rate than a bigger person. Um, so it's important to be matched up with the right oxygen delivery system, the right flow rate. Hopefully, a knowledgeable guide who's been through it a number of times can help walk a person through that. But I think it's very helpful to use oxygen at high altitude. It just aids us in so many ways, and including enhancing the experience. So again, I'm very bullish on the use of supplemental oxygen at high altitude. Also for myself, I'd love to stay in this game as long as I can. So for longevity, it's important for me to use oxygen just so I'm not doing damage to my body and mind, excessive damage over time.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. And um I will also add nothing but respect for anyone who, can climb without oxygen. It's incredibly difficult. It's an amazing accomplishment. I have immense respect for anyone who climbs Everest at all. I think it's a really challenging endeavor. It's deserving of a lot of respect. Um, and if you can do it without oxygen, what is it? I mean, let's just throw out a number. 10, 100 times harder, 10 times harder. I mean,
Yeah, somewhere in there, 10 to
I
100
don't
times.
know, but like
Yeah.
it's so much damn harder. So let's admit that. And it's something where, I think the top athletes in the world are challenged to do something like that. So, interested to see how that sort of progresses and if there's more of a interest in climbing without oxygen in the next couple of years. It's an exciting time. It's exciting time right now as everyone's kind of heading out the door to Everest. So we've made our summit attempt. We've topped out, top of the world, man, standing on the summit. It's an incredible feeling. I think it's a different feeling probably for everyone. For me, it was a sense of euphoria and gratitude, like you mentioned, to all the people around me, my teammates, the Sherpa team, the guides who allowed me to get up there, the people that had given me the opportunities to go climb Mount Everest. And then you remember, oh, now we have to get down. There's still the whole descent. There's not the summit's not the end point. You don't get to just get whisked away down the mountain. Now you have to get back down. So maybe you could just walk us through that process. And I know, and statistically, m most of the deaths and accidents on Everest do happen on the descent. So decision making is another thing that you kind of touched on earlier, but I just want to give you a chance to talk about that because I think people are really interested in, how guides assess clients, what you're looking for, especially on the descent, if people are losing it a little bit, how you kind of manage that. And just kind of like when to turn around. Like, do you kind of notice some things where it's like we have a hard turnaround time or the weather's turning on us? So any insights you can give us on that would be great, Garrett.
Well, a lot of good questions there, Leif. And again, hopefully we all are lucky enough to get to the summit on a beautiful day and enjoy some time there at the top of the world, just taking it all in, um, and thinking about what it means to us before heading back down. But in getting to the top, there are other risks to consider. There's the weather, which is constantly changing, the route conditions, the other climbers on the mountain that might be impacting our climb or our experience somehow. And then there's our personal health, right? Our own ability to be fit and capable and continue on, which all have to be taken into consideration. So really for a guide, a risk manager, it's a moment by moment assessment of what's happening on the mountain with our team, right? We have to constantly be evaluating and assessing the changing conditions. And hopefully we get to the top, but sometimes we don't, right? It could be too windy. The day we summited last year, May 23rd, we were able to check the weather forecast that night and saw the winds were dropping around 4, 5, 6 a.m. So we actually waited a bit to start off from the South Col
Mm.
at Camp 4. And when we were heading up to the balcony on the triangular face there were loads of teams coming down. They said, "Oh, it's too windy up there. We got to the balcony, practically got knocked over. It's not in the cards today." So they were coming down, and we kept going up. And I was thinking to myself, am I making a bad decision here? Are we going to get into that high wind and also have to turn back and have blown a bunch of our oxygen and strength and resources? But fortunately, the weather forecast played out true. We got up there and the wind had died. And so we were lucky to have a great summit day with nobody else up there. But the weather's changing all the time on Everest, and even the best weather forecasters, the best meteorologists in the world that have been doing this for decades and have every possible resource available to them to make their own forecast model interpretation of what's happening on the mountain, they get it wrong sometimes. So it's just such a dynamic place that's always changing. We have to be ready to adapt to whatever it throws at us, and hopefully react responsibly, not push up there in a huge storm and become incapacitated from bad weather, which we've seen happen before. A couple times I've been up there, we've climbed up and found other climbers that unfortunately got caught out in a big storm and became incapacitated and could no longer continue on, eventually ran out of oxygen. So it's life and death up there. And again, going back to being part of a strong, well-supported team where everybody's looking out for each other and supporting each other, I think is just so important rather than going at it alone. Because when we're up there by ourselves, making our own decisions, sometimes things get harder. And if we have to work through a problem, it can be more challenging to solve that problem if we're by ourselves, as opposed to having other team members around there to help figure it out, get through it. Um, but other considerations besides the weather could be crowds, right? That's been a big topic the last 10 or 15 years. And it's true. Everest is such a special, magical, iconic place. And because access has improved and technology has assisted, more people than ever are climbing Everest these days. And hopefully that weather window will be weeks long in May where people are making their summit attempts. But if it gets compressed, if the fixed lines don't get put in until mid to late May, and the weather window is such that we only have a few days of good weather up there to make it a summit attempt, everyone could be going together at the same time. And we're talking 1,000 people plus, right? With all the foreign climbers, all the Sherpa climbers, other support staff up there, it could get crazy. So we do everything we can to see what's going on with other teams on the mountain, what their plans are, and we try to strategize with what we know to plan a summit attempt when hopefully it's not too crowded up there. So fingers crossed, we're not impacted by other teams on the mountain. And then beyond that, it's our own personal health, right? And that's something the guides can keep an eye out for. They can monitor their client climbers during the day as we're going up. But really, it comes down to everyone being a good and responsible climber themselves and checking in with themselves and asking themselves, "Hey, am I doing okay? Am I strong enough to get down the mountain under my own power?" Because it's like swimming out from the beach into the ocean. You only want to swim so far that you have the strength and the ability to swim back to the beach. You don't want to become exhausted out there on your swim and not be able to get back to the safety of the shoreline. So climbing the mountain's the same thing, right? You only want to use up so much energy that you have enough in the tank to make it back to camp under your own power, in good style, and then recover in camp for the next day's activity. So I'm always trying to reiterate that to our climbers. Hey, make sure that you're checking in with yourselves, with each other, that everyone's doing okay, because it's important for us all to get down under our own power and in good style. We don't want anyone like trying to slide down the mountain on their bottom of their down suit, right? We want everyone walking down in good style, good control, safe and efficient all the way back to high camp.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. It's there's so many things to consider, so many factors involved there. It strikes me that having someone with so much experience on the mountain is extremely valuable. A guide like yourself who's spent so much time up there and seen a lot of different problems that arise, and your team as well, kind of following from that leadership. I like that you mentioned you need some luck, you need some good fortune. I think that's something that doesn't get called out enough, and we at Evoke really want to give you control over one of the biggest factors that you can control on a big mountain, which is your fitness and your preparedness. And that's in your hands right now. And that's how you go into a trip like Everest, giving yourself the best chance of success. But even with that, even if you're the most prepared and the fittest athlete in the world, things still happen on these big mountains. You still need some good fortune to get to the summit. So respect that and anticipate that there could be setbacks, there could be problems along the way that you have to work through. But if you can show up in really good shape, prepared to go all the way up and all the way down the 360, 100, we got to get all the way back down. It's a round trip. Then, you give yourself the best chance of reaching the top of the world. So, no, that's all really good advice. Interesting about so many different dynamics, things you have to consider on Everest these days. And then you've added one more step because obviously it wasn't hard enough for you. You had to add another mountain onto the onto the
Why not?
trip. So talk about the Lhotse edition. This has become more popular in the last couple of years. And I think you were the first to do this, right? To add the
Right.
climbing
2011.
Lhotse 2011. And so you're jumping over from the highest mountain in the world. Now here's the fourth highest mountain in the world right next door. So what's that? What's that? How does that go? You get back to the South Col, and then where do you go from there?
Oh my gosh. Well, coming down from the summit of Everest, you remember this. You see the summit ridge below you, and it's just so impressive, right? It drops off, sheer drop off on either side. Um, and then in the distance, you can see Lhotse, right? Towering beyond the south summit. And it just looks, to me, when I see it, it just looks so enticing. It's like it's just luring me in, right? Saying, "Come over, please, climb up this couloir." And it looks much steeper than it actually is from that viewpoint. But the first time I summited Everest, 20 years ago, 2006 May, I was coming down from the summit, and I remember looking over at Lhotse and thinking, "Gosh, it's just right there. How come we're not going over to climb Lhotse?" And back then, no one had done it that way. Um, the day after the Everest summit. Some climbers previously, like Ed Viesters, had climbed Everest and Lhotse during one expedition, but with a proper rest and base camp between the two summits. But that got me thinking, like, is this something we could do? And then when I was guiding for Alpine Ascents in 2011, we actually put it together and had some climbers sign up for the Lhotse add-on option. And we put the logistics into place. We have to have the Lhotse permits in advance. We had to have the oxygen in place. We had to have the Sherpa support team ready to go. And we did that. We got back to high camp after the Everest summit, rested up that afternoon and evening, and then set off that night. Departed out of Camp 4, dropped down over the Geneva Spur about 500 feet to what we call the Lhotse Y, where the route splits, and then start making our way up Lhotse over the slopes into the Lhotse Couloir, which is a really fun climb. It's very different than the Everest climb experience. It's steeper, and once you get into the couloir, it sort of snakes its way up some really interesting rock features, and then you pop out right at the top and then up to the summit pyramid. And it's a tiny summit. Really only one person at a time can get up there. And it just drops off on the other side. And the view back on Everest is spectacular. To see what you just climbed 24 hours ago in like full daylight, full view of the mountain, the route is so incredible, so impressive. So I'm hooked on it. I've done it 5 times, the back-to-back Everest Lhotse combo. Hope to do it more. It's so much fun. And you're right there. So what's another day of climbing to get to the top of the fourth highest mountain in the world and get to have that experience climbing up the couloir to the summit and then looking back on Everest. That's the best part. Just seeing what you accomplished the day before and then heading down from Lhotse. So we call it the Everest and Lhotse combination. I'm sure there's other names for it, but really it's just adding on Lhotse the day after the Everest summit. And it's just another day of climbing. And then after the Lhotse summit, we come all the way down past Camp 3 to Camp 2, where the other Everest climbers are also spending the night. And we're all reconvene there in base camp, catch up, share the stories. And then the following day, we would head down to base camp together.
Amazing. So yeah, you get a little bit of a break at the South Call after Everest Summit. You spend one night there, right? And then get up early and descend a little bit and then head back uphill up the at the Y and head up Lhotse. Um it's yeah, you say, "Oh, it's just another a little bit more climbing." It's a hell of a hard challenge. I think mentally especially is just thinking of, okay, I'm focused on Everest. I've, kind of given this my all, and now that it's not over. Not even is it not over because I have to descend, but I'm going back uphill again. I'm climbing now another steep climb up to a small summit, looking across at Everest. Man, the view. I can imagine looking back over at Everest and just having been on that terrain, how incredible that is. But um, this has become more popular, but I think it might not be for everyone. So this
Right.
is something that takes a real mental drive and focus. And I think the mental side of this is maybe even harder than the physical. I don't know if that's true in your experience, but to go climb Everest and then think to stay so focused and to stay locked into your climbing experience and to know I'm torched. I just had a summit climb to, 29,000 feet, and now I'm still going to go up tomorrow. So how do you stay mentally, or like, what advice do you give clients who are on that track, who are thinking about Lhotse? Um, is it something that you just kind of offer to everyone, or more of like you can tell if someone's really motivated about this or they're wanting to pursue it themselves?
Yeah, definitely something they have to plan in advance because we have to get the permits and the oxygen and logistics in place. But it's generally something people are thinking about well in advance of the expedition. And you're 100% right. I believe it's all mental at that point. We get back from the Everest summit. We're all exhausted. We're all spent, tired, beat, and we crash in the tents. We continue breathing supplemental oxygen, rehydrate, get some food in, and we start to recover, right? And then we spend the night there. And typically, folks would wake up and go down the next morning, but the Lhotse climbers have to wake up at midnight and do it all over again, right? And I'll tell you, the hardest part for everyone is just getting out of their warm sleeping bag in the middle of the night to put the boots on, jump outside the tent in the cold, and trudge off to start the second 8,000-meter summit attempt. And in my 5 experiences doing the combo Everest Lhotse back to back, personally, and we've done more for the company. Um, no one has ever not made it to the summit of Lhotse after they started out from Camp 4 with me. They've always made it to the summit. That said, I think only about half the people signed up for the Lhotse option actually decide to go for it,
Mm.
to get out of the sleeping bag and get out of the tent and go for it because after having climbed Everest, it's such an achievement, such an accomplishment. And it feels so good to be in that warm sleeping bag, sucking bottled oxygen, in deep sleep that night, which is well deserved. To break that and get out and start Lhotse is tough. It's mentally tough. But once we get out of the tent and get moving, we're fine, right? And we've never not summited Lhotse. So it's definitely mental at that point, and it's just committing to getting up at midnight and doing it, right? Having your breakfast, putting on your boots, and suiting up and heading out the door. It's all
It,
at
it
that point.
Oh man, no, it's the hardest part of every climb is getting out of the warm sleeping bag in the middle of the night. And in this case you're doing it at 8,000 meters. And you've just climbed the biggest mountain in the world. So it's
Right.
it's it's the epitome of like this is the hardest start to a workout I've ever done in my life. I always tell folks sometimes when workouts are hard to come by, it's like just try to start it. See if you can get warmed up. And if you're still feeling, terrible, you're warmed up, but it's just not feeling okay, like shut it down. That's okay. You probably need the recovery. But if
Right.
you can get it started more often than not, you start to feel better. Your body starts to
Oh,
move. And oh, that's so true for cold, high mountain. Um, and the pull of the thick air is strong when you've already climbed, Everest. You say you've achieved that big thing. You're thinking about that Mai Tai and the
yeah.
beach down in Koh Samui, and you're thinking, why the hell would I go back up another
Right.
mountain right now? Um, that being said, about 3 weeks later, you'll be sitting on that beach and thinking, man, wouldn't it be nice to be up in a tent, a cold tent, and a nice
Right.
alpine with a nice view? So we can't have it all, but no, the mental side there is really, really challenging. So if this is something that you're thinking about, prepare yourself for that, right? Know that it's going to be hard to get started that next day. It's going to be hard to get out of the tent and Garrett's yelling at you saying, "Get your boots on, man." Like that you better expect that because it's going to be a challenge there. So, no, that's amazing. It's an incredible climb. And then you're all the way back down, right? You're descending off Lhotse back to advanced base camp, camp two that day.
All the way down to
Or
camp two, typically pull
uh-huh.
in afternoon, early evening, have dinner there with the rest of the team that didn't go to Lhotse, that spent the night at camp four and descended to camp two. And get ready for our final day on the mountain, which is the next morning. We typically get up like 5, leave by 6. We like to head through the ice fall when it's still cool and hasn't warmed up too much. So hopefully down to the ice fall, back to base camp by lunchtime, and then big celebratory dinner there with all of our climbers, our Sherpa team, base camp staff, and then folks are heading out the following day, usually by helicopter or trekking down back down the route to Lukla and flying back to Kathmandu.
Yeah, thank you. That's what an amazing expedition. Thank you for leading us on that, Garrett, and taking us step by step along the way. I certainly hope our listeners enjoyed that journey. It is a long expedition, so we've taken a while to, touch on different subjects, and yeah, I hope everyone's, found this informative and interesting and fun. Um, Anything else that you want to add, Garrett? Any last pieces of advice or things that people should think about if they're, thinking about Everest for next year, for example, 2027? Any last things to add?
Oh, everyone has their own Everest story going to the mountain, their own personal journey that makes it so unique and special to them. And that might start in childhood when they first learn about the highest mountain in the world, or maybe through a Everest documentary about famous climbers or expeditions on the mountain. But it's so special and just magical for someone to get to go to Mount Everest and experience the mountain, hopefully get a summit attempt in. And like you said earlier, I think it's really important to control what we can going into it, because there's so much that's out of our control once we're there, like the weather, the changing conditions, the other climbers. So having a good training plan, good preparation, working with a coach, someone like yourself, that can help you get as prepared as possible, just so that you can hopefully enjoy the experience as much as possible and get the most out of it, the most enjoyment and time present on the mountain, just soaking it all in, I think is really important.
The fitter you are, the more fun you'll have.
Yes.
It's true on every mountain in the world. So absolutely, we're here at Evoke to help you in any way we can with training plans, coaching, consultations. We're constantly working to put our best training knowledge out into the community. If you'd like to work with us, please reach out, visit our website, go through our social media. We have lots of amazing coaches who've been up Everest and high mountains themselves, and we're here for you. So we look forward to working with you. And to sign off, I just want to wish Garrett, you and everyone in the Everest community, all the guide services and Sherpa and climbers this year, the best of luck this season. We'll be following along and rooting for all of you. So thank you for being here today and good luck this year.
Thank you so much, Leif, and thanks to you for training a number of our past Everest climbers who had very successful climbs and experiences. And thanks for the folks that you're training right now to go to Everest with us next month, and hopefully the folks in the future. Thank you for getting them as prepared as possible to be part of my journey to the top of the world.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure anytime. And I'm excited for the season. So thanks again, Garrett. And thank you all for listening. Uh, Good luck this season and happy trails.